Good morning, I'm Mabel Jong and you're watching the World Healthcare Congress Interview Zone, and I'm very pleased to have Amit Shankardass in the seat. He is Executive Vice President of Marketing at Teleperformance. And first I need to ask you, Amit, well, first of all, thank you for joining us. What is the company Teleperformance? Tell me about that.
Sure, and thank you for having me here. Teleperformance is a provider of outsourced multi-channel customer experience management, and what that means is literally we're the voice or the agent interaction or the chat interaction or the back office processing company on behalf of many other companies across the globe. Specifically in the healthcare space, we have about 5,000 people that provide interaction services or back office processing on behalf of payers, providers, DMEs, pharmaceutical companies. We interact with about a third of the world's population on an annual basis.
Okay, so it sounds like you have your finger on the pulse of what consumers want, what they're saying, and what companies think they need to hear from consumers to do their job better. What is it about the consumer that has a consistent theme throughout that you can speak to?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And as a company that interacts with a third of the population, the world's population on an annual basis, we have to have our finger on the consumer's pulse. And very specifically, there's one overarching theme across all industries, all sectors, and that is consumers want to be met on their terms, when they want, where they want it, and they want that interaction to be seamless and consistent. This is true across all industries. Consumer expectations, Mabel, has changed dramatically. How consumers expect to be treated, how they expect you to know them, to interact with them, that's pretty much globally, universally the same. What changes then is by demographics, by regions of the world, maybe by problems they're looking to solve in terms of the specifics. But fundamentally, consumer expectation has skyrocketed. We live in a consumer demand-driven engagement environment today.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like Teleperformance really uses all that's available to them, social media channels and other channels, to reach the key consumer. Is that right?
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. And you know, one of the things we did, in fact, to your point about having the pulse on the consumer, we did a study very recently. At Teleperformance, we have a group called the Customer Experience Lab. These folks study consumer preferences, wants and desires, changing needs, and on the one hand, on the other hand, they look at companies' methods and methodologies that they interact with consumers and look specifically at how that interaction is either overlaying or there's a gap within that. And when we do that study, you're exactly right. We do look at social media, we look at voice, we look at online, face-to-face, you look at it all in this multi-channel world we live in.
When do we get to the point when too much information is not effective?
You know, that's a great question, and the other, you asked me the question on what's the change, and I said it's about consumer expectations. I think the other one I should probably add is complexity. Look at the environment we live in this healthcare world. Choice now, where it was mandated to us, has now become our option. The individuals having to buy their own healthcare plans, the individuals having to read through reams and reams and reams of paper and gobbledygook, right? So there is an underlying need to keep information clean, consistent, and understandable. And that's the other part, right? One is having the right channel of interaction. The other is the understandable piece. We found, for example, in this consumer lab study, we found in our CX lab study, we found that a lot of people prefer voice. Phone is a very common interaction channel. But one of the most interesting things we found is the prevalence of or preference of members to use chat. So you go online, you're interacting, and you have a spur of the moment question, you quickly click to chat, and you engage with a consumer. Unfortunately, payers aren't really providing that much chat on the forum. In fact, we found that while chat is a top 3 preferred channel of communication, in our research, we found that less than 40%, just about 40% of payers are actually providing that channel as a channel of interaction.
Well, can I ask you even specific things like time of day in order to reach certain people? I mean, have you done studies on that, on when is the best time to reach your audience?
That's a great question, and it's time of day, it's venue, it's method, it is being proactive versus being reactive. To your point about complexity of information, we can do things proactively to educate our audience, to help them along and guide them and deflect their angst before they call us, right? Or before they interact with us.
Is the consumer fickle?
I think it's unfair to say the consumer is fickle. The consumer behaves in ways that we encourage them to behave. And what I mean by that is if we provided clean, easy to use information, I think that it'd be easier for them to make decisions. But when you provide them pages and pages of rules and regulations, if, then, where, how, it becomes confusing. I mean, for both of us, we'd read a page and we get it, we read 25 pages and we might scratch our heads.
Right,
so I don't think
right.
it's fair to kind of put it on the consumer. I think the onus is on companies to provide that engagement platform.
It sounds like Teleperformance is really on top of this. You know a lot about the people that you're working with. Has there been any surprises at all during this rollout of the Affordable Care Act and really the first year of adoption of the exchanges?
Yeah, I think for us, I won't call it surprises as much as learnings. What we've seen, again, through the CX Lab research, when we went to members and said, what channels of interaction are you using? How do you want to interact with your payers? We saw that payers on average provide 4 channels of interaction. So payers are multi-channel. However, what we found is that there seems to be a disconnect between the channels that payers are providing and those that consumers want to use, that members want to use. Chat, I mentioned, for example, face-to-face in our research showed that there's less of a preference of usage of face-to-face on the consumer end, whereas payers are actually providing more face-to-face than consumers want. We found, for example, in the social media realm, 80% or 60 or 80% of companies provide have a social media platform, but less than 0.3% of consumers were looking at that as a forum to find care or find resolution to issues.
Okay.
Social media was used mostly for negative sentiment, more for PR perspective.
Okay.
So surprises, I don't know. Learnings, definitely sure.
And finally, Teleperformance is an international company. So how do American consumers compare to other consumers that you work around with in the world?
That's a great question, and through the CX Lab research, we actually looked at the global healthcare market. All the stats that I was mentioning earlier were the U.S. market and the U.S. consumers, but we looked at other markets, and you see some discernible changes. But much of that, to your earlier question, is also driven by the fact that we behave differently and have different expectations in different countries. But you're right, as a global company, we looked at all the numbers and metrics and behaviors across the globe. We operate in many countries across the globe. We actually service consumers in 63 companies. Wow. But I can't say we know everything about all 63 companies and every consumer there, but we do know a lot.
Okay. Well, Amit, thank you so much for your time today. A real pleasure.
Thank you, Mabel. It's been a pleasure.
And I'm Mabel Zhang. Thanks for watching.